Arun, thank you so much for joining us in this next edition of Fire Up. It's a series of startup founder interviews that we're doing, trying to extract some very interesting experiences each founder has, each startup has, that is worth sharing with other founders. I mean, there are always some very unique things that every startup does and manages to get some results. And that's those practices what we are sharing. Now you are in the space of hiring. I mean, like the company, especially you're leveraging tech for hiring. And any solution for hiring is an extremely crowded space. Just anybody and everybody that can do any bit of programming thinks that's a space they can go and do something, and they try also. Most of it is void of any innovation or any creative use of technology. And you have both of those in your product. And that's what we wanted to discuss today. How do you create, I mean, leverage AI to create that value in a crowded space? Right?
Sure.
That can break free from the right all that noise that's out there. How do you break free from the noise and stand out? So that's the topic that we'd like to discuss with you. So thanks for joining us. And to get started, why don't you just in a few minutes just describe your journey with Hyreo, your entrepreneurial journey.
Sure. My pleasure, Professor Ramesh, to join this. More than happy to share insights, if at all it's worthy for the rest of the crowd. My journey, Professor, we started a little early. We started in 2016, me and my co-founder. And I would say, I'll talk about what we did with Hyreo. Before that, I'll probably quickly say what is Hyreo, and then get into, how do we get there. Now, fundamentally, what we're trying to do in recruiting, as you rightly said, is how do we engage with candidates more effectively in today's world? So, if you look at recruiting, it's a very complex process. It takes multiple stages. Every industry has its own different nuances of recruiting. Although we generally try to project recruiting as a one size fit all kind of a process, it's very, very nuanced. Every industry has its own recruiting challenges and the way they kind of address that as well. The unique problem that we are trying to address is how do we keep the candidates engaged during this sometimes 2 months and sometimes even 6 months of a long hiring cycle. Now the world has changed, the audience that we are talking to has changed, the millennial crowd is different. So the traditional ways of recruiter leading the entire process, and we not leveraging data as much as we want in the recruiting process in itself is the challenge. So we wanted to look at how do we engage them better, how do we use technology to create a sort of virtual support engine for candidates throughout the hiring process. That's what Hyreo is all about. What happens if you don't engage with candidates? Now that's the problem statement. If you don't engage with candidates properly, is your your employer brand essentially gets hit. People don't know, or people may not be able to relate to the kind of brand positioning that you do. But when you're doing recruiting, you have a very bad experience of recruiting with a company. Second thing is, we've seen that in many occasions, people actually drop the application process and go to your competitor or somewhere else. So having a one-on-one personalized connect throughout the process is essential, or else you risk some of these things. So when we started in 2016, honestly, the market was not this competitive. There weren't so many players trying to do something in some part of recruiting per se. But we also pivoted in a bit when we learned more, when we got customer feedback, and how we wanted to sort of move further in this journey. So we started in 2016. Me and my co-founder, we kind of batchmates in engineering in Cochin University here in Kerala. We went different routes. We were in service, IT services, R&D, etc. before we kind of came together. And the idea came in to do something in recruiting, because towards the last stage of my career with corporate, I wasn't involved as the demand side or people who were trying to hire a lot of people, especially in tech sector. You can imagine there's a lot of demand. And we felt that, the KPIs that we were sort of trying to measure in our recruiting process, where you had recruiters, business guys, external vendors, candidates, panelists, so many stakeholders involved, some of those KPIs were never getting met. And we felt that the fundamental reason for that is we are not taking a customer support kind of a mindset when we are doing recruiting. And that was essentially the start of where we felt we had to sort of pivot and do something and ensure that the solution can be a fit into your existing infrastructure used for recruiting. There are softwares used, so you cannot have a standalone solution. You have to have something that is integrated. You cannot expect the recruiters to change the way they are doing or the business to change the way they're looking at talent. So it has to be something that coexists but still creates value, and in the end it sort of translates more value for somebody who's trying to run the sort of recruiting process. So
So you
technology wise,
sorry. I was going to ask, like, see, most people are trying to, in the hiring space, going after saying that we will do the resume screening, we will do the resume job fit, right? And they're thinking that's where AI kind of fits in. And to some extent, they're right, but that's not an easy problem to kind of semantically match, because resume is never complete. So, but anyway, there are a lot of people trying in that space. But you said, like, I'm going to go and, you're going to go and, like, try and use technology to enhance the experience of interacting with the candidates, right?
correct.
So now, which is a unique positioning for especially AI, but it's not surprising. Just that not many have done that yet. So which is, I think, where the opportunity for you comes. Now, how did you use technology in this to help with the process?
Right.
Especially, where does AI? How are you leveraging AI to improve that employer-candidate interaction?
Right. See, to the point that you mentioned, everybody started with parsing CVs and tried to make a sort of a match, and that exists and that will continue. We are refining those algorithms. We also have capability in that space. But what we felt is, we have to create, as you mentioned earlier, what is that niche that we are trying to sort of create here? We believe that no matter how much of matching we are doing and how much of candidate nurture that we are doing to identify the right talent, most of the loss or most of the effort loss or money loss that was happening for organizations is once you identify talent. Great talent are always in demand, which means as you take them through different stages, multiple rounds of interview, offer process, and so on and so forth, we were losing out on that connect part of it. So what we try to do is, how do we apply the principles that customer support, let's say, uses in businesses? How do we apply that in recruiting? So what we did is we need to have a virtual assistant. We need to have an agent which is available 24/7 for candidates to access data, provide data, ask questions, get answers, and sort of be ensure that they're getting the attention that they really need in the hiring process. That's number one. Number two is, all of this is going to create data. How do I use analytics? How do I use data engines to ensure that this goes back into enterprises to sort of tune their process, identify the right sort of candidate who needs attention, and how do I take them through the rest of the journey? Irrespective of what is the outcome of the recruiting process, we still wanted to make sure that that particular candidate is wowed by the experience of going and recruiting with that company, and there is a word of mouth and there is a positive sentiment. In terms of technology, we are using front end to interact with the candidates. We use chatbots, emails, SMS, etc., to kind of create that connect. This sort of gets plugged onto our backend engine, which uses this data to give critical insights to recruiters and recruiting leaders. Things like what are candidates asking for, what are they looking for, where are they getting stuck, what stage in the process are we getting sort of not so great experience, and so on and so forth. So it's a combination of NLP, chatbot, and data analytics, which sort of gives organizations real data on how their recruiting process is running.
So how did you discover this? You mentioned that you also do the whole resume side as well. So is that where you started, and then you discovered this white space? How did you discover this? It's one thing to
Yes.
say I will use AI in hiring process, but it's something else to kind of find that niche where there's a serious opportunity. So how
Yes.
did you either pivot or discover that niche?
So this happened somewhere in 2017 when we were working with a pilot customer. wherein when we started, we also were looking at how do you do this matchmaking more effectively and take it one step further and see how we can sort of pre-screen those candidates. Now, the problem with matching is I can write anything on my CV, and the more well written CVs get picked up in such engines, and there are a lot of ways to kind of hack such tools. So you had a engine to match the CV. Then you also had an engine to kind of screen them, basically on validating whether they have the experience, whether they have the skills to do what the organization wants them to do. So when we tried piloting it, we understood that this had a fair amount of success. It had a fair amount of success in the sense the recruiters were willing to try it out, and they saw positive results, and they were willing to sort of give us that credit that we were able to solve this matching problem and pre-screening problem to an extent. But when it comes to real the key KPI that matters is what's the conversion. Does the business have to wait, or do they have the right people at the right time being hired into the organization? So post this screening stage, there was no solution really to take it further. And then we took the same pilot customer to kind of study where was this happening. And we found that a lot of candidates were dropping applications midway through. And when we interviewed them, we found that they were not so happy with the process that was set in. There was a lot of opacity in terms of what should I be doing next, what are the next steps, where should I find this information, when can I talk to my hiring manager. We found a lot of insights in terms of how you could accelerate and ensure that the closure rate is higher. Hence we came up with interventions. Hence we looked at how do we employ feedback mechanisms more effectively. Now we're working on analyzing sentiments to give you insights on that. Then we started researching on how do you look at propensity to join. When a person, you found a great talent in the market, but how do you ensure that this person is joining, and how do you measure the interest level or the propensity in that sense for that candidate to join. That became our next evolution. So if you look at it, discovery was done, and it was done effectively by a lot of great fantastic startups, both Indian and elsewhere. But how do we bridge that gap and ensure that there is a smooth landing for that process, in the sense, are they getting on board? So that's where we sort of did our first pivot to take it to that stage. And we have to also thank our initial few customers who were patient enough to answer our queries. They were our evangelists in the sense, these guys have some technology using chatbot and stuff like that, but how can that be explored further? How can that be sort of created into sort of an end-to-end cycle? So that's how we evolved, in a sense.
I mean, this is something that most people ignore. So when I was in the industry, the company I used to run, I actually had recruiters tell me when we noticed we had a very, very low joining rate. Like we find 4 or 5 good candidates, like 2 or 3 will accept and only 1 will join. And so then we started analyzing why is it not happening. We realized that in the first call, when they call the candidate, the first call after they got the resume, they're very curt. It's almost like, okay, do you have this? Did you do this? You did this, you did this, you did this. Like a very quick call, 5-7 minutes is okay, like we'll call you back. We said, like, look, I mean, right there you shut off. Even the guy just out of sheer vengeance will say, like, I will get an offer from this company and not join because they were so rude to me.
Absolutely.
And so then we said, look, you have to assume that this is a candidate we are hiring. You can't say, like, when we decide we'll be nice. You can't choose when to be nice. And the first contract, look, the first contract has been a very pleasant experience. You tell, like, I'm just calling, acknowledging that we got your profile, and like, be nice. We start with an introduction to the company. Spend 2-3 minutes. It's a short call, and we'll call you again, set up a longer conversation. I just want to check a few things, ask a few questions, give the candidate a chance to ask some questions, and make it very clear. It's just an introductory call, just to acknowledge that we got your profile. And then where if you do this, especially recruiters, most people don't go sit with them and see how they're doing the calls. I mean, so it's amazing you notice this, and everything you said is like music to my ears. Though I don't now hire anymore, I'm in academics, but the problem that I was dealing with 5-10 years back, these are all things that, I mean, you bang on discovered. Now, how does it connect? I mean, when you go talk to customers, does it resonate? Because there's the other part, right? It's one thing to see how technology can help solve a problem. is something else that it resonates with the customer. So how will the resonance be when you go talk to the customers?
Yeah, it's a very interesting question, Professor. I mean, we learned it trial and error, but when we go to a customer to pitch our solution, what we ask them is, sir, can you give us some data points? We ask them, sir, you know that your conversion rate is X percentage. And if you offer 10 people, 5 people, 6 people, 7 people join. But we ask them, sir, what are the top reasons why people join? What are the top reasons why people are not joining? Do you know, if I do one or two or three things, this could increase my joining rate or any of those matrices, if you could positively impact any of those metrics? We go back to customers and tell them that when some of our users use this platform, these are the benefits that they sort of got. We kind of try to tie it to stories that we've seen, examples of how it has worked in the past and where it has worked. For example, we've shown customers around feedback, the sort of word clouds that we built around what feedback we were getting, and we were able to sort of compare geography wise, business unit wise, even at recruiter levels, to show them that here you're seeing more action and there seems to be a positive relation with the kind of engagement that the recruiters are doing. We show these data points to kind of get a buy-in. And one of our challenge is that for systems like ours to work, we need executive level buy-in, because we need to integrate with their ERPs or workflow engines, which means that all your different organizational key stakeholders are going to come in: data security to infra to IT to all marketing to corp communication. Everybody needs to be involved because you're talking to the candidates. Only if we are able to showcase that value through examples, and we tell them that, hey, these are some of the, or at least the top 3 areas that we can target in your area, in your industry, in your specific business case, if you identify them as your problems, and then we can go ahead. And this is a problem that we face also, again, tying back to what you said earlier. There are chatbots, there are recruiting HR chatbots as well. So for me, if you are able to connect it to a direct problem that a particular customer has, only then they are interested even to do a pilot with us. So if you research very clearly on an industry problem or probably a corporate problem, and now if you take, it's a very different scenario that we live in today's world, but generally if you're able to tie it back to organizational problems and how they're struggling because of that, then we are able to. For example, the very large IT outsourcing firm, we took a case study, we spent some time with them after showing some of the results, and we actually showed cost versus benefits for them, for that group that we were targeting to kind of get in. Very, very large organization that we are talking about, a couple of 100,000 employees in the organization. So we really have to break it down into value in dollars to show them that this is how it can impact you, and this is how it can sort of change the way it works. And any startup who's trying to get into the recruiting HR space, I would strongly recommend going with value and numbers than showcasing the product alone.
No, absolutely. I think, like you rightly said, I think you need to understand the domain, understand the problem. Even more so that given this is crowded, and if you really believe technology can solve problem that is not solved right now, the first point is to understand what is not solved. And it, like you said, maybe different industries have different problems. So understand which industry has what problem, and then with that hypothesis, go talk to the customers, and then something will connect with them when you start describing the problems, and then set up a POC. I think it's a nice blueprint that you have laid out for anyone that needs to get into a crowded space, assuming that new technology can solve things that were not possible earlier.
And Professor, one quick thing that I would say is, when we say it's a crowded market, right? Let's look at it, as a problem statement. It is crowded because there is huge business opportunity there. Otherwise, people are not going to come there. 2, it is a necessity service. So if you take education, healthcare, recruiting, you cannot take away these horizontals or these functions from from any sort of a community in that sense. So crowded means that there is a need for that. What we really need to do there is articulate our value so that we are heard amongst the noise that you see.
Absolutely. I think that
If you
is the
can break it down, if you can break into the right market segment, the recruiting itself is like a blue collar, a white collar, you have tech hiring, pharma hiring, sales hiring is very different. If you can identify that market segment, a large enough market, uh, with or without a crowded competitor landscape, is going to still give us a reasonably good value.
Absolutely. I think true. I mean, it's important to position yourself. I mean, you're not a recruiter that is coming and saying, look, I'll solve this problem for you. They may do it differently. They will say, look,
Absolutely.
talk to every candidate of yours on the phone. And so that's a different segment, what they are doing. So you're right. You need to slot yourself right and pick a problem that, or a segment for whom like technology is imperative to solve the problem in a uniform way. So I think it's been fantastic, Arun. Before we conclude, one thing we've been asking all our startup founders is like, from your experience, both professionally earlier and specifically now as an entrepreneur, these last 4 years, one growth hack tip that you would share with other founders.
Oh, well, I'm of the believer that you need to sell before you build the product. I learned it the hard way. We did the other way around. But for any startup, person that I would meet, I would say first sell. You don't need a product to sell. You need a PPT to sell. So go find your customer and talk to them. Primarily, if you're in the B2B space, B2C is slightly different, obvious reasons. But if you are in B2B, that's where I have a little bit of experience, if at all. The first thing is you have to sell. That's what you need to be doing. Secondly is if you are doing tech, SaaS, enterprise solutions, digital and putting yourself in on the digital platforms, be it any of those ways, using all possible ways to create traction and interest in your product is what I would say is the foremost thing for tech B2B enterprise kind of solutions, because there is a lot of noise there. So you really have to be at the top of the game in terms of positioning your brand. As engineers, we would essentially solve the technology problem, but there is no fun in solving a technology problem till there is a market. So as an entrepreneur, your job is to create the market and find the ingredients to make it work. Uh, Solving the problem would happen, but ensure that you know the problem, you wider
The
knowledge of the
problem
problem.
worth solving.
Yes. So I think
No.
go sell, go digital.
No, absolutely. I think we can't emphasize enough. And believe it or not, of the 30 conversations we have had, at least 10 founders have shared this as in some form, in different ways. I mean, you put it more kind of very specifically saying like go sell. But in some form, they have said this saying like you make sure there's a market, do whatever you can before you actually go invest in building. And you're saying not just go find if there's a market, actually sell, get a customer and then go and build. That is, I mean, absolutely. I think no two ways around it. If you're building, it should have a purpose, and the best purpose is somebody waiting for it.
Yes.
And so, no, absolutely bang on. So, Arun, thank you so much for the time that you spent with us today, and all the best. I hope lockdown in the digital world, you're in the digital world already. So, hopefully, your world is not that badly affected, and the industry is still continuing to hire. So all the best in the lockdown and then post lockdown in your journey.
Thank you so much, Professor. Thank you, CIE team.